Hello and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin. Thank you, Mozart. I so appreciate it. I'm going solo tonight in as far as my engineer, Randy Fryer, is not available, so I'm pushing all of buttons myself. I should be able to do so after years of being on the radio. Pushing a few buttons shouldn't be that difficult. Anyway, I'm very excited to have our guest today, the author of The Intuitive Investor, a radical guide for manifesting wealth, Jason Apollo Voss, and we'll get to him in a moment. I want to just remind you all that this is an election year, and our economy is largely correlates highly with the behavior and activity of our body politic. So especially in an election year, we will see the ebbs and flows of business activity on Wall Street and elsewhere very tied in many respects to what's going on in the, shall I call it horse race, because ultimately that's really so much what it is. But I want to bring someone who is outside of the usual horse race between the Democrats and the Republicans to bear here, as I have done on prior shows, and we will have him on as a guest quite soon, and that's Rocky Anderson of the Justice Party. I've been working to get him on Steve Colbert, so it will be a larger audience than even A Better World, and on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. That is proving to be quite an effort to accomplish, but I'm working on it nonetheless. And Rocky Anderson actually has himself achieved quite national prominence back when he was mayor of Salt Lake City between the years of 2000 and 2008. He's an award-winning lawyer for some 21 years and has a distinguished human rights record during those years and a green environmentalist record. So he is eminently qualified for the work of an executive in the executive branch of government. Once having been a Democrat, realized that they were feeding from the same trough, so to speak, and decided as the Republicans and thought this is not the way to a truly democratic governance, and opted out of that system and has been running now on the Justice Party ticket, an independent ticket. And for those of you who may not know, historically, the United States political system has really nursed some 3 to 7 different political parties throughout most of its history. And even, of course, today, we have always several parties running, but it used to be a lot more ambitious, meaning that the other parties played a much more significant role. But since the Democrats and Republicans have had things kind of buttoned up and tied down as well as they have over the past 40 to 50 years, there's been very little evidence, prominent evidence, of the other parties. The one exception in relatively recent history was the appearance of Ross Perot on the scene, where he managed to get in by elbowing, no doubt, into the televised debates. And it was a very interesting effect he had for those of you who may have watched those debates. And he really, really positively, from my point of view, affected the outcomes there. And this is the kind of democratic dialogue I think we really want to see in this country. So I really recommend you go and inquire about what Rocky Anderson stands for. He reduced the carbon footprint of Salt Lake City, an otherwise extremely conservative city, and he did so within the course of some 3 years by 1/3. It's a remarkable feat, and it sets a precedent for other cities across the country, and I would dare say that we would not be having the kind of economic difficulties and struggles city by city across the country that we're currently having if there were politicians being as coherent and smart, and in respect to our guest today, I will say whole-brained in their approach to politics as Rocky Anderson. So I'd really encourage you to go to voterocky.org or justicepartyusa.org or abetterworldtv, where I have a series of my interviews, a couple of interviews I've done with him on Progressive Radio Network, as well as video of him giving talks and interviews. All of that is on the lower right-hand column of the homepage. So I really do encourage you to tune in and come to understand that strong bond that exists between the legislative bodies of our country and what goes on in our economy. It cannot be overestimated just how deep those bonds are, and the reasons for that we can talk about another time. But right now, I really do want to turn our attention toward our guest today, who is a remarkable young man who has achieved so much in a short amount of time and is bringing a new consciousness to the field of investing, one that I think the world of investing is clearly benefiting from, seeing as his work as a portfolio manager beat the NASDAQ by 77%, the S&P 500 by 49%, and the Dow Jones Index by almost 35% during his years of active trading. This is a phenomenal record, and anyone with any bit of intelligence would want to light up and see what in the world is Jason Apollo Voss doing. Well, he's documented a lot of that in his book, The Intuitive Investor, A Radical Guide for Manifesting Wealth, and he's just one of the most delightful, humane, loving men I have actually ever met, quite honestly. It's a delight to have gotten to know him prior to the show, and I'm sure after the show. What's interesting is that his method is a very humane method. He's using the capacities given to us by our Creator of a whole brain and nervous system, not just the left hemispheric linear mathematical function that we would think upon using we could make reasonable inferences and know what's going on. Well, you know, that does work up to a certain point, and then it kind of peters out. And Jason is here today to talk to us about what we can do to really use more of us to engage in the process of intelligent and even wisdom investing, could be another way of putting it. Jason, are you on the line? Jason, are you on the line? Okay, let me try this. Jason, are you on the line?
That was a very flattering introduction. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. There you are. Very good. Very good. I was scrounging for the right button to push, and eventually I got it, and I have the pleasure of hearing you. Good. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Well, you know, you are bringing something really novel and fresh to the marketplace, and I really want to extol it because I think it's rich with virtue. And if our pocketbooks are the only thing that's rich, we're missing out on the exciting game of life.
Well, you know, interestingly enough, what you suggested that I have kind of a novel approach to things, and I spend quite a lot of time in my book talking about the fact that investing is actually to make a decision. We typically think of investing in one context and one context only, and that's to make money. And I think of any choice that we make in life to be an investment. You know, we put our reputations on the line, we spend our time, we spend our energy, we get vulnerable with our emotions, in addition to all the pocketbook type issues.
That is true.
And what that means is that doesn't it make sense to bring as much consciousness to your decision making as possible? And that's really what the book is about is, okay, because I have an investment background, it makes sense that I talk to you about investing in terms of, dollars and cents, but it also, can be generalized to this, like, let's be conscious about every choice that we're making. And so that is definitely my approach.
Yes, indeed. No, I appreciate that. Now, tell me, first start off, if you would, just listing some of, I did mention the accomplishments you had. Why don't you tell us what the context was and what process you went through in making the decisions that you made?
Yeah, my story began, and by the way, I was a non-believer, and by non-believer of intuitive process and of like sort of what I would call unscientific kind of means when I began my career. I was a dyed-in-the-wool atheist and had been raised that way. And early on in my career, though, I recognized very quickly that all of the fact gathering that I was doing, it didn't help me make decisions because facts, by definition, are things that occurred in the past, but investing unfolds in the future. And that means that every decision that we make is actually from the gut or is an intuitive decision that we're making. And so the rest of my career, I kind of refined that process, and then post my career, did even more refinement, which resulted in my book.
Yes, exactly. I understand. So what inspired you to go this different route, if you will, in the domain of investing, since you were especially so atheistic, which, I'm not, there's this funny implication that to be atheistic means that you don't want to use the other side of your brain. I don't think so. But
you're right.
One could be an atheist and still be highly intuitive.
Sure. No, I totally agree with you. And in fact, as my sort of spiritual life and my investment life sort of unfolded together, I recognized looking backward that I had been a very intuitive person my entire life. So through the evolution, like what happened was, I discussed the early days of my career when I recognized that there was no such thing as a future fact, and how that led me to believe.
That's a very interesting point,
Yeah, and it led me to believe that, we've got to engage our emotions here. And so the first part of my process was let's explore emotions and how they contribute to, our investment decisions. And I spend part of my book talking about the fact that there's a difference between emotions and feelings, and that was one of my first realizations, and that is feelings are the raw data. So, for example, anybody who's listening this evening, if they were to tune into the temperature of the space around them, the temperature exists independently of an opinion. But if you ask most people, they'll assign a number to it. They'll say, it's 70 degrees or whatever it is. But that is not, that's when it becomes an emotion, because you've put your prejudice on it in a particular way, because you've evaluated something which was cleanly received to you in your sense, in your sense of the world. And so I spent a lot of my career like, how do I strip out that process? How do I just tune into the raw feeling of something so that, say I'm looking at Apple, for example, how do I feel about Apple? How do I feel about the fact that Steve Jobs died? And, when you can strip away those emotional things, you get pure, raw, sort of what I'll call data. It's feeling data that you feel in your body. And I started then reacting to that.
Are you saying that the emotion sort of takes people out of the feeling, or it's a super concentrated feeling in one direction? Under which is the feeling?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for summarizing. I give an example in my book, which is somewhat related to the temperature example I gave. Say two people go out on a day that's brisk and it's overcast and say it's even snowing. That even though the conditions are the same, two people can have a very radically different opinion of that day. One person can say, this is miserable, it's cold, I don't enjoy it. The other person can say, I love these kinds of days because it keeps people indoors and I have a private moment with nature or whatever. But both of them have engaged their emotions. The fact is the day is whatever the day is, and there is information there for us to be able to perceive and make better investment choices from, such as, I'll probably be cold, I should put on a coat, kind of a thing.
Yes.
But the point is that there's an emotional prejudice. I prefer cold days. I don't like cold days, whatever. And as soon as you've done that, you can't feel the truth of what is around you.
Yes. Once you're lost in the opinion, you've lost touch with the raw data that you're referring to as feeling. No, I think that's very clear. It's very
exactly.
clear.
And honestly, it ties back to your introductory remarks about a third party in the U.S. We have two parties that are very opposed to one another, and the opinions are so strongly rooted that, frankly, the actual, feeling sensation, which is we need some leadership here, is missing from the dialogue.
Yes, exactly.
So this manifests itself over and over and over again, writ large.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. We're really caught in our own subjective framework, and that delimits all of our decision making, which is what you're saying. Fundamentally, we're as humans, we're decision makers.
That's correct.
We're problem solvers and decision makers, and we're also experiencers. So you forget, that's the base and the root of it all. One of the things I feel your work has done, Jason, is you're giving greater credibility to, if you will, and valence to the importance of feeling. Now, women have been saying this to us all our lives, but how does it feel? And therapists, I should say. So how does that experience feel? And to reach in and get in touch with that, and you well put it, raw data. It is data. It's just a different kind of data than digital data that is represented numerically, although feelings can be too. That's a whole other conversation. But to give proper place in our human experience, including our human rational decision-making experience, to the feeling of something, like you were saying about Apple, about Steve Jobs, that's very interesting. How you feel about that sector, etc., will influence, tell how that unfolds.
Well, that process, I advocate my book very strongly. Meditation is the easiest tool for, stripping away the emotional sort of prejudices and limitations, as well as. Yeah. And by the way, that is a rich field. I mean, I have been meditating for most of my life, as you and I discussed when we had talked before. I've been meditating since I was 7 years old, that I've been conscious of. But here's the thing: everybody
as an atheist,
has been meditating.
That's particularly interesting.
Well, and I didn't know that that's what I was doing, though. And this is just the thing: is everybody each day has a meditative state that they achieve, whether it's they're on the subway to work here in New York City, and they sort of check out of the subway realm, and they're all of a sudden in, okay, what do I need to do realm, or they're analyzing something else. That's a meditative state, even though people don't tend to think of it as being that way. And so in my book, I spent a lot. I spent a lot of time telling people and giving support to people that, hey, look, you don't have to be a meditator, as in shaven-headed cave dweller, in order to do this. You just have to recognize that this is a natural brain function, acknowledge it, make a little time for it, and then you can start to strip away some of the emotional prejudices and then get to the juicy stuff, which is, how do I feel about Steve Jobs dying?
Yes, exactly. I should bring this up, that in Tibetan, there are two descriptions of meditation. One is the idea of eyes cast down or closed, following the breath meditation with all sorts of mantras and yantras and all sorts of things, mandalas that can go with it. And then there is the other form of meditation, which is actually just another word for concentration, which is, another way of saying that is focused attention. And you do not have to be a cave dweller. You do not have to shave your head. It has nothing to do with it. You could even be wearing a suit and tie, as long as the tie isn't too tight, sitting in front of a computer on Wall Street or anywhere else you happen to find yourself. And focused attention is, as you said, meditation. So in reality, we are all doing it in one form or another routinely.
That's correct, yeah.
I'd like to jump into the domain that is very much a theme of this show, Jason, which involves socially conscious investing and businesses for social responsibility. I have often said that it is the business mind and business activity that has brought us to the very brink of disaster right now, what with the nuclear power on the rise yet again, even though all the facts show that it is highly dangerous, highly polluting, and we saw what happened in Fukushima. We see that the power of business has turned our world into a military zone, we see all sorts of things of a world that most of us really do not want. It's really the very few who would want a world like that just for the sake of their pocketbooks. There's a whole other way that we know to conduct business. So I always say it's business that's brought us to the brink, and it's going to be a shift in the business mind and the consciousness of the business leader that's going to bring us back and set us on a path of harmonious sustainability. Could you comment on that and what it is you see as an investor, and having been deep in the world of business from an investment point of view, having managed billion-dollar portfolios, what you see in this light?
Well, first of all, I agree with you. And for me, the primary issue is one of time scale, and that is one of the reasons why nuclear power can be considered is because people have the inappropriate timescale for evaluating something like that. In other words, they're simply looking at 20 to 30 years out and the possible consequences. And what's not been factored in is what is the ultimate, and by ultimate I mean the absolute effect of nuclear power on the planet and on humanity and the other living organisms that we share the planet with.
Yes, exactly.
And so this shift, many people in the green movement and the conscious capitalism movement, of which I, consider myself a part, get very apoplectic and very, frustrated, that there isn't greater progress being made. But I actually think that the shift is one that's fairly easy to make because it's a very subtle shift, and that is, to get business leaders to stop riding their sort of capitalist bicycle staring at the front wheel and instead look further out into the horizon. And that means incorporating, long-term decision-making, long-term ramifications into those decisions, and then coupled with that, and it's very integral to this process, is there has to be an acknowledgement of we can't anticipate the long-term consequences of our decisions today. So, for example, if we go back to the late 1800s going into the 1900s, probably if we knew what we did now about the pollution caused by, carbon-based fuels, oil-based fuels, we probably would have priced them higher or not used them at all. We would have looked for some other alternative. But the fact is nobody could imagine the full ramifications of that choice on the world. And so people used it and 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 used it until the point where, at now where we have kind of a polluted world and we're running out of options fairly rapidly. Yeah. And so that should be a case in point to business leaders that, we need to take a more long-term view, and consequently we need to be a little bit more cautious and conscious about how we use our resources. So for me, that's where the heart of the issue lies. Yes.
I agree. I mean, I would like to think that business leaders back then at the turn of the 19th into the 20th centuries would have, if they were to have known those consequences, would have not gone for the short-term profit, but for the long-term benefit. I like that idea. When you kind of peer in to the world today, and I agree with you, by the way, and that's a very important point. I say this to people all the time. The shift in consciousness, the opening of the aperture to a new way of doing business is really a very small shift. It is a very human shift. It's the one that says, how can I help you? Instead of, I want everything for myself. You will actually not find in human psychobiology that latter choice very often. I'm here just for myself. The hell with everybody else. It's not human to be that way. We are actually wired neurologically to be of service to each other. And sometimes service is opening up a door for somebody. Sometimes it's giving them your seat. Sometimes it's creating collaboration in business where everybody wins. There are just so many ways for neighbors to cooperate, helping each other grow a garden, paint a house, whatever. This is old-fashioned stuff. What do you see in this regard, Jason, with the upsurge of green technology and the sustainability movement of conscious capitalism in business? What do you see?
Well, before I do that, I want to address, support your point. One of the things that I talk to people about all the time is this cooperation aspect of consciousness.
Yes.
The competitive aspect has been done, and it's not that it's not valid. It's just that it's just one solution to, amongst a possible set of solutions. Cooperation is one of them. And the irony in the business world is that cooperation exists writ large, and it exists in the form of the corporation, believe it or not. Even though these entities think of themselves as, competitive enterprises, they actually are some of the largest cooperative, groupings that have ever been imagined. And so at a certain point, again, we have another subtle shift that has to happen. But more and more people have to have a conversation with business leaders and say, are you aware that you actually are cooperating already with the, to General Electric, with the 300,000 employees that you have? For example, and once they start to realize that cooperation is okay and it leads to profitable outcomes, more and more people will start to do it. And honestly, to your point about green investing, there's a lot that's missing in green investing to capture, the attention of a lot of people. But I feel if we address some of these bigger issues that we've just talked about, cooperation and changing the time scale, then a lot of this stuff will be more obvious to people and there'll be greater support. Because what we're really talking about is a recognition of the interdependency of people, and their environment along with, their neighbors and what have you. And I'm happy to talk about specific things in green investing, but I think that it's a natural outcome, green investing, quote unquote, will become just investing once we make these shifts in consciousness. Yes.
I think that's a fair thing to say. I think it is. When you look at the different sectors, so to speak, of the marketplace, do you see that this is one that is gaining ground?
Well, it is, but I have a couple of friends who very much specialize in green investing, and our opinion is it's still at its nascent stage. Now, the crazy thing is for those of us who have been tracking this kind of stuff our whole lives, and I was raised in a household where, you thought about, the consequences of your actions. This sort of green notion has been around for, if you go back to the mid-1800s, it's been around for 100-plus years. If you go back to the business aspect of it, it's been around for 40-plus years. So it seems like, how can you say this is at the nascent stage? But the fact is most people out there still don't have an appreciation for how they interact with and with their environment and the consequence of their choices upon the environment. So in terms of actual sectors, they're the ones that are particularly obvious, of course, are wind and solar technologies. But less obvious are things like how do we make things more efficient? So there are logistics companies out there that specialize in creating software so that supply chain management, that is how you get goods from the manufacturer to you, the consumer, how you make that more efficient can be one of the great green technologies. And there are quite a few firms out there that do the logistics stuff of it. Exactly. And then you have, of course, water technology, which is one of the big ones that's going to go forward. Water has been free. Desalination is one, and water has essentially been free for all of humanity. But the nature of it is it's not going to be free going forward. And the reason why is because so much of it is polluted. We're going to have to start to pay to have it be clean. And so those are some areas that capture my attention and my interest. Yes, exactly. Listen, believe it or not, until we learn how to manufacture time as well as we manufacture money, we're going to have to leave it at that because we've run out of it. So we've run out of clean time, purified time. I want to really thank you. It's unbelievable how quickly that went. I was having such a good time with you. Jason, I want to really express my appreciation of your good work, and I want to just encourage you to keep it up. Thank you, Mitchell, and you too. I appreciate it. Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. Thanks so much for joining us. Visit us at our website at www.abetterworld.tv, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.